And the word behave has been ruined for me by Austin Powers, just when he kept saying, "Oh, behave." But
Yeah.
can't help but
I
think of
never
that.
once thought of that, but that's a good point. Yeah.
So imagine Austin saying that about the Bible. Oh, behave. What do you mean by that? Like, what does it mean to not behave? And just some examples for folks that might be like, what does that mean for a book to not behave itself?
Yeah, it's just more sort of my tongue-in-cheek way
Yeah.
of saying when the Bible doesn't do what we were taught it has to do,
Yeah.
which is like all the parts make sense. In other words, there are no contradictions. Every writer's on the same page theologically. There are no tensions between the Gospels. You know, when you read Samuel King's and their account of things, and then the Book of Chronicles, they cohere perfectly. Well, no, they don't. The Bible doesn't behave itself very well, does it? I mean,
Mm.
according to that kind of a standard. I think it's fine just the way it is. It just doesn't. It doesn't act. I mean, again, whoever's listening to this, I don't know. I'm not trying to make people mad here. Not really, but I have to say that I think an inerrantist mentality of the Bible is one where the Bible really has to conform to a fairly narrow and rigorous set of standards that the behavior of the Bible itself simply won't recognize.
Mm.
It won't fall into those categories.
Yeah.
And that's all I mean by, the Bible doesn't behave itself.
Were
It's
you,
fine the way it is.
were you at some point an inerrantist?
Um,
Oh, you stumped him. You put him on the
Good
spot there.
question.
Yeah.
Got him.
Good,
Didn't
good
think that would
question.
be the question that got him.
I think my I'm trying to think back in my seminary days. I probably no, I wasn't in the sense of it's central to my faith, and if you don't believe it, there's something wrong with you.
Okay.
I probably spoke the language, but I remember, after going to graduate school and dealing with some historical things, when I came back to teach in seminary, the way I approached it with the students was the Bible is inerrant in the sense that there's nothing in there that God doesn't want in there,
Mm.
which means the contradictions,
Hmm.
the historical problems, the scientific problems, the moral issues, all that kind of stuff.
God's okay with this being the
And
Bible we have.
Yeah.
You mean?
exactly right, but which is not what evangelicalism means by inerrant. They means it's more superintended by God, not to give misleading information, to make sure it all coheres. In that sense, I don't think I was ever an inerrantist like that.
Okay. Could you maybe
Um,
flesh
yeah,
out inerrancy and inspiration is another word that gets used a lot. And
right,
maybe I feel like what some people mean by inspiration, they
right.
maybe assume inerrancy goes along with it. But is it possible to believe in an inspired scripture without being that wooden inerrantist that you talked about a moment ago? And how would
Yeah,
we even use that word now? You know?
that to me is the crucial question. How would we even use it? Because I think, see, terms like, inspired or revealed
Yeah.
or authoritative, I think those are fine words to use, but they can't be freighted with sort of fundamentalist implications or assumptions.
Hmm.
And again, I don't say that to be polemical, but that's what I think. I'm just telling you where I'm
Yeah.
coming from.
Please.
Um, so, to say that the Bible's inspired, I wrote this book, Inspiration and Incarnation. And the point of which is that you need to look at the word inspired within the context of the idea of incarnation, where God is embodied in reality in our here and now way of thinking and things like that. So the Calvinists do have a wonderful term about how God condescends to our level and speaks baby talk. That's what John Calvin said.
Hmm.
So you're going to get people in the ancient world describing creation in Genesis 1 the way they do, because that's the way these ancient people thought, or the Adam and Eve story, or the flood story. This is the way they thought. Um, that's not an error. It's
Right.
just how they thought, right?
Hmm.
Is it inspired? Yeah, well, because inspiration is never about God's up here and downloads facts, and now you have objective facts. Inspiration is always an encultured process, an encultured act, which means it's going to look a lot like the people who are talking.
Hmm.
So you've got this interesting
Yeah.
kind of interplay, and I'm not making that idea up. I mean, actually, some pretty conservative Calvinists have thought that, like B.B. Warfield, for example. in the 19th century. There's a name
Yeah.
that nobody knows, but
No,
that's
yeah,
okay.
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
Yeah, but so you have basically God's side and the human side are sort of working mysteriously together in some sense. But whatever we mean by inspiration, we can't take away the human contextual element,
Yeah.
which is stamped all over the pages of the Bible. So
Yeah.
whatever inspiration means, it doesn't guard against the human beings not being human.
Yeah. Yeah.
It actually works with that somehow. How does that work? I have no foggy idea how that works. Okay, and I'm sorry about that, but I don't think anybody else does either. But that's the idea. So you can use inspiration that way, and revelation works a certain kind of way. It's not God imposing. Now you have absolute truth. It's this, I think, delicate communion between spirit and people, where they begin seeing something that's beyond their own moment and beyond their own culture. I actually think that describes a large part of the Bible, right? The Bible is people enlightened for their time, I'll put it that way, speaking things of God into themselves, into the world around them. At no point does it stand still, however. It's always sort of moving. And you see that within the Old Testament, and you see it between the Old Testament and then the Judaism that came before the time of Jesus. You see changes there. You see changes in the New Testament. You see changes in the early church. It's like this thing is always cycling like this, and revisiting things and coming out with new ideas and different ways of thinking. That's the Bible. And if you want to say that's a revelatory act, I'm all for it, as long as you take that process seriously. Your definition of revelation has to take into account how the Bible behaves and what it's doing, right? And it's not just a flat book of rules.